A 58-year-old father walked into the Black Thunder clubhouse on a cold November night and said 5 words that made 35 hardened bikers reach for their weapons. "Please kill my daughter tonight." What these motorcycle riders discovered next would test everything they believed about mercy, justice, and the unbearable weight of a parent's love. Thomas Mitchell had been a high school principal for 32 years. He was the kind of man who helped struggling students, who stayed late for parent conferences, who believed every child deserved a second chance. He lived in a modest house on Riverside Drive with his wife Catherine and their 24-year-old daughter Emily. Neighbors described them as the perfect family. They had no idea what was really happening behind those closed doors. Nobody knew that Thomas hadn't slept properly in 4 years. Nobody knew that Catherine cried herself to sleep every night. And nobody knew that Emily Mitchell was slowly destroying everyone she'd ever loved. It started when Emily was 20 years old and home from college for Christmas break. She complained of severe headaches that wouldn't go away. The doctors found a brain tumor the size of a golf ball pressing against her frontal lobe. The surgery was supposed to save her life, and it did, but it also changed her into someone her parents no longer recognized. The tumor and the surgery had damaged the part of her brain that controlled impulse, empathy, and moral reasoning. Emily came home from the hospital as a completely different person. She would smile while hurting animals. She would laugh when her mother cried. She would say the cruelest things imaginable and feel nothing. The doctors called it acquired sociopathy caused by frontal lobe damage. They said there was no cure, no medication that would bring back the daughter Thomas and Catherine had raised. Emily still looked like their little girl who used to bake cookies and volunteer at animal shelters. But behind those familiar eyes was someone who felt no love, no guilt, and no remorse for anything she did. At first, Thomas and Catherine tried everything: therapy, medication trials, behavioral specialists, and prayer. Nothing worked. Emily would sit in therapy sessions and lie perfectly, telling doctors exactly what they wanted to hear. Then she'd come home and do something horrific, just to watch her parents' reactions. She burned down their garage because she wanted to see how fire looked when it consumed her father's classic car that he'd restored over 10 years. She poisoned their neighbor's dog because it barked too much, and she was curious what dying looked like up close. She seduced her mother's brother at a family gathering just to destroy Catherine's relationship with her own sibling. And through it all, Emily would smile that empty smile and ask, "Why are you upset? I don't understand." But she did understand. That was the worst part. The brain damage hadn't made her unaware. It had just removed her ability to care. The legal system couldn't help. Emily was an adult, and she was technically competent. She hadn't committed any crimes they could prove. The poisoned dog could have eaten something in the yard. The garage fire could have been electrical. The seduction of her uncle was consensual between adults. Thomas and Catherine were trapped in a nightmare where their daughter was systematically destroying their lives, and nobody could stop her because she was too smart to get caught. Then 3 months ago, Emily did something that crossed a line even Thomas couldn't forgive. She got pregnant on purpose by a man she met at a bar. When she was 8 weeks along, she told her parents she was going to have the baby. Catherine was horrified. "Emily, you can't be a mother. You don't feel love or empathy." Emily had smiled that terrible, empty smile. "I know, that's what makes it interesting. I want to see what happens when someone like me raises a child." Thomas felt his blood turn to ice. "You want to experiment on your own baby?" "Why not?" Emily said casually. "I've read about attachment theory. I'm curious if a baby will still bond with a mother who feels nothing. It's fascinating." Catherine started crying. Thomas realized in that moment that his daughter was planning to torture an innocent child just to satisfy her curiosity about human psychology. He begged Emily to terminate the pregnancy or give the baby up for adoption. She refused. It was her body, her choice, and legally, nobody could force her. The baby would be born in 6 months, and Emily would have complete legal custody. Thomas contacted lawyers, therapists, and social workers. They all said the same thing. Unless Emily committed a crime or was ruled incompetent, there was nothing anyone could do. A brain-damaged woman with no empathy was about to become a mother, and the system had no way to protect that unborn child. That's when Thomas started having the dark thoughts, the ones that kept him awake at night staring at the ceiling. The thoughts that made him hate himself but wouldn't go away. His daughter was going to torture an innocent baby. The only way to prevent that was to stop Emily before the baby was born. But how do you stop your own daughter? How do you make that choice? Thomas prayed for guidance. He prayed for a miracle. He prayed for God to take this burden from him, but the prayers went unanswered, and Emily's pregnancy progressed. She was now 5 months along, showing clearly, talking about her experiment with the same clinical detachment a scientist would use discussing lab rats. Catherine had a nervous breakdown and was hospitalized. Thomas was alone with a daughter he no longer knew and a grandchild he had to somehow protect. That's when Thomas remembered something from 20 years ago. A student named Marcus who had been in trouble constantly, fighting, dealing drugs, heading toward prison. Thomas had seen something in that angry teenage boy that others missed. He'd spent extra time with Marcus, had gotten him help, had believed in him when nobody else did. Marcus had turned his life around, joined the military, and after his service, became a member of a motorcycle club, the Black Thunder MC. Marcus had visited Thomas 2 years ago to thank him for saving his life. He'd given Thomas his phone number. "If you ever need anything, Mr. Mitchell, anything at all, you call me." Thomas had never imagined he'd actually use that number. But here he was at 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday night, standing outside a motorcycle clubhouse about to ask criminals to murder his own daughter. When he walked through that door, 35 bikers stopped everything and stared at the elderly principal in a cardigan sweater standing in their clubhouse. Marcus recognized him immediately. "Mr. Mitchell, what are you doing here?" Thomas's voice was completely flat, emotionless from exhaustion and despair. "I need someone killed tonight before I lose my courage." The room went dead silent. Marcus approached carefully. "Sir, what are you talking about?" "My daughter," Thomas said. "I need you to kill my daughter, Emily." Marcus thought he'd misheard. "Your daughter? The little girl who used to bring you lunch at school?" "She's not that little girl anymore," Thomas said. "She's a monster, and she's going to torture an innocent baby. I've tried everything else. This is the only way." The president of Black Thunder, a man called Reaper, stepped forward. "Old man, you need to explain yourself right now." What Thomas told them next made every single biker in that room go quiet. He explained the brain tumor, the surgery, the personality change. He explained 4 years of psychological torture, destroyed relationships, and calculated cruelty. He explained the pregnancy and Emily's stated intention to use her baby as an experiment in maternal deprivation. He explained that the legal system had failed, that doctors couldn't help, that his wife was in a psychiatric hospital, and that he was out of options. "She's 5 months pregnant," Thomas said. "In 4 more months, she'll have a baby. And that baby will suffer every day of its life. I can't let that happen. I won't let that happen." "So you want us to kill a pregnant woman?" Reaper stated coldly. "I want you to kill the monster wearing my daughter's face before she can hurt an innocent child," Thomas corrected. "I'll pay you everything I have. My house, my retirement, everything." Marcus looked at his former teacher with heartbreak in his eyes. "Mr. Mitchell, you saved my life. You're the reason I'm not dead or in prison. But what you're asking is evil," Thomas interrupted. "I know I've become evil trying to fight evil, but I don't know what else to do." Reaper made a decision. "We're not killing anyone tonight, but we are going to meet this daughter of yours." Thomas's face fell. "You don't understand. She'll manipulate you. She's brilliant at appearing normal." "Then let her try," Reaper said. "Give us her address." An hour later, 6 bikers, including Marcus, knocked on Emily Mitchell's apartment door. She answered wearing pajamas, looking young and innocent with her pregnant belly visible. "Can I help you?" she asked with a sweet smile. "Your father sent us," Marcus said. "He's worried about you." Emily invited them in without hesitation. For the next 30 minutes, she was the perfect picture of a concerned daughter. She expressed worry about her father's mental state. She claimed he'd been acting strangely since her mother's breakdown. She said she was scared he might hurt himself. She was convincing, articulate, and seemingly genuine. Then Reaper asked a question. "Tell me about your baby." Emily's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "What about the baby? Are you excited to be a mother?" Reaper asked. "Excited isn't the right word," Emily said carefully. "I'm interested to see how it develops." "Develops?" Marcus asked. "Most mothers say they're excited or nervous or scared. You said interested." Emily's mask started to slip. "I suppose I'm curious about the maternal experience from a neurological perspective." The bikers exchanged glances. Reaper leaned forward. "You're curious about motherhood the way a scientist is curious about an experiment." Emily smiled then, and it was the emptiest smile any of them had ever seen. "Exactly. You understand." My father doesn't understand, but you do. What exactly are you planning to do with this baby? Reaper asked quietly. Emily began explaining her plan in clinical detail. How she would provide physical care but deliberately withhold emotional connection. How she would document the baby's attempts to bond with her. How she wanted to see if a baby raised without maternal love would develop normally or be permanently damaged. She spoke about her unborn child the way someone might discuss a science project. She felt no shame, no horror at her own words. She genuinely didn't understand why what she was describing was monstrous. When the bikers left her apartment 20 minutes later, they were all silent. Marcus was crying. They'd just met a real-life monster who looked like a pregnant young woman. Back at the clubhouse, Thomas was waiting. "You see now?" he asked. "You see why she has to die?" Reaper sat down heavily. "I've met serial killers with more humanity than your daughter. So you'll help me?" Thomas asked desperately. "No," Reaper said. "We're not killing her, but we are saving that baby." What the Black Thunder MC did next was technically legal, but required resources, connections, and intimidation that only a motorcycle club could provide. They hired the best lawyer in the state who specialized in medical incompetency cases. They had Emily evaluated by 3 different forensic psychiatrists. They documented everything she'd said about her intentions for the baby. They got statements from neighbors about dead animals. They found the bar where Emily had deliberately gotten pregnant and got testimony from the father, who was horrified to learn what Emily had planned. They built an airtight case that Emily Mitchell was mentally incompetent to care for a child. The court battle took 6 weeks. Emily was brilliant in court, presenting herself as a misunderstood young woman being persecuted by her mentally ill father and a motorcycle gang. But the 3 psychiatric evaluations were damning. All 3 doctors concluded that Emily's brain damage had eliminated her capacity for empathy, that she viewed her unborn child as an experiment, and that she posed a danger to any child in her care. The judge made a historic ruling. Emily Mitchell would be allowed to carry the baby to term, but upon birth, custody would immediately be granted to Thomas and Catherine Mitchell. Emily would have no parental rights. Emily showed no emotion when the verdict was read. She simply nodded and walked out of the courtroom. 3 months later, Emily gave birth to a healthy baby girl. The moment the umbilical cord was cut, hospital security removed the baby from Emily's room. She didn't protest, didn't cry, didn't ask to hold her daughter. She just watched with clinical interest as they took the baby away. Thomas held his granddaughter for the first time and wept. Catherine, released from the psychiatric hospital, held the baby and whispered, "You're safe now. You're safe." They named her Hope because that's what she represented. Hope that sometimes the system works. Hope that sometimes evil can be stopped. Hope that sometimes love wins. Emily was released from the hospital and disappeared. She moved to another state and cut off all contact with her family. Thomas heard later that she'd gotten another job, another apartment, and seemed to be living a normal life. Without the pressure of dealing with her family or a baby, Emily apparently had no reason to cause harm. She simply existed, empty, but not dangerous. The Black Thunder MC set up a trust fund for Hope's future. Marcus visited Thomas and Catherine regularly to check on the baby. Reaper, the hard-faced biker president, became Hope's godfather. He was there for her first birthday, her first steps, and her first words. Thomas never forgot the night he walked into a biker clubhouse and asked them to kill his daughter. He was ashamed of that moment for the rest of his life. But he was also grateful that instead of committing murder, those bikers had found a better way. They'd saved an innocent child without taking a life. Years later, when Hope was 7 years old and asked about her mother, Thomas told her the truth. "Your mother was sick in a way that couldn't be fixed. But a lot of people loved you enough to make sure you were safe." Hope looked at the photo of Marcus and the other bikers at her christening. "The motorcycle men?" "Yes," Thomas said. "They're your guardian angels who happen to ride Harleys." Emily Mitchell is 32 years old now and works as a data analyst in another state. She lives alone, has no friends, and feels nothing. The brain damage that made her a monster also protects her from feeling any loss. She doesn't miss her daughter because she never loved her. She's not evil anymore. She's just empty. Hope Mitchell is now 8 years old, raised by her grandparents and protected by 35 bikers who will always make sure she's safe. She's a happy child who loves animals, helps at school, and dreams of becoming a veterinarian. She has no memory of the woman who gave birth to her. She has no memory of the night her grandfather almost became a murderer to protect her. All she knows is that she's loved. Sometimes the bravest thing a parent can do is admit they can't save their child. Sometimes the most merciful thing is to accept that the person you love is gone, even though their body remains. And sometimes the people who save you aren't the ones you expect. Thomas Mitchell walked into a biker clubhouse planning to become a murderer. He walked out a man who'd learned that even in the darkest moment, there are people who will find a better way. The Black Thunder MC took an impossible situation and found a solution that saved everyone except the one person who couldn't be saved. That's what real strength looks like. Not killing monsters, but protecting innocence despite monsters. Not taking life, but preserving hope. And sometimes hope is a baby girl named Hope, raised by her grandparents and watched over by guardian angels in leather vests.